Hey, BJ here with Business Coach Mastery with a specific training for you. And my prayer is that it adds value to you, all about your paralysis action plan having to do with fear. Okay? We talk about fear a lot on our trainings, on our podcast, on the things that we do. And then the reason why I'm bringing this to you today is that I had a conversation with one of our coaches in our coaching community, on our coaching team, all about this very thing. And someone who is seasoned, someone who has experience, someone who's not new to the game. Yet they called with a request, and I thought, if somebody who's been doing this for a while is also challenged, and when we got down to the root of the issue, it was all about fear, then likely if you are looking to start to grow, maybe you've started your consulting and coaching business, but it's stuck. Maybe you've dreamed about doing it for a long time, but you just haven't taken the action to go do it. Oftentimes I discover that the root cause is the good old fear. That is a real thing. And so yesterday I was on the phone, got a phone call from one of our coaches, and they asked for some help in an area in doing an assessment with one of his prospects. And this assessment that we do, we call it the 100K challenge in our Done For You coaching system. And he was sitting down talking to talk to a business owner who owned a pretty successful HVAC company, okay? And in his kind of just getting things into his head, as we all do, he reached out for help and asked me for some help through some of the pieces. We talked through it, but then in that conversation, I began to ask the question, hey, this isn't new to you. What's really going on? And he basically, in a few words, began to kind of describe, for some reason, he just really got into his head. He was fearful of moving forward with this prospect on his own, and he wanted help, which I'm always happy to help our coaches. However, the bigger discovery was about, he recognized it through self-discovery. He's like, wait a minute. After talking this through, I realized that I'm sabotaging myself by allowing fear to get in my way. I think I can do this on my own. We had a great conversation. It was in a great community, great bonding, and all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to bring this same thing to you today. Look, the thing is, fear is natural. It's emotional response. It's the way since Adam and Eve bit the apple, it is an absolute emotional response to, this is really big, and I want you to write this down and keep it in front of you, to perceived threats or challenges. So our coach was building a perception of a threat or a challenge of what's not true. In his case, it absolutely wasn't true. He just allowed those things to kind of get into his head and mess with him. But again, it's an emotional response to perceived threats. And I often find, even in my own self, is that just in my coach's case, we allowed the perception to literally eat at him for days. And so perhaps you're in a similar position where you have these aspirations to achieving your goals, to achieving your dreams through making a higher income and making a significant impact, just like I do, just like our coaching team does. But if you're not careful, fear can often morph, this is another thing to write down, into irrational force. And that irrational force, it happens because we've allowed that to manifest itself. And from a faith perspective, I firmly believe this is the enemy at work in our lives. Like, I'll argue with you all day long that that's exactly where fear comes from at the end of the day. And we allow that to seep into our lives. And it's not always straightforward. It can come into and manifest in over time, and building up in just small incremental ways. Procrastination. You may not realize that sometimes that you're kicking the can down the field because you're procrastinating. Self-doubt, self-loathing. I can't do this. That was an issue yesterday on the call, that fear had gotten into. I don't know that I'm good enough to be able to do what I'm being asked to do in this assessment. A reluctancy. We get fear into reluctancy to connect with people. Christ wants us to be communal. and to build relationship with one another, to bear one another's burdens, to help one another, to be there for one another. And if you're not careful and you let self-doubt, self-loathing kind of seep in, as we can all do at times, we backtrack and we detract from building conversation, from wanting to be around people. We start to do things in isolation, and we begin to tell ourselves, and there's nothing wrong with having some time on our own for space. But if we're not careful, that space removes us from building relationships, building rapport, adding value. And that's a significant part of building a successful business coaching business. So I'm going to give you some action points, a couple of things I want to cover, and I'm going to give you 3 specific, very, 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 very simple ways to beat fear right up front so that you can move forward and achieve the goals that you're looking for. So I call it the paralyzing effect of fear. And number 1, it is the analysis of paralysis. Fear often can manifest itself and or just lead to overthinking, which it really is that analysis where we just kind of get into an overconsumption of information, and we feel like we can't move forward if we don't have more info to analyze, especially in a world where there's a lot of information that we can sift through. I went to the bookstore yesterday, which is to Barnes & Noble, first time in a long time. And yeah, I was standing there and just recognizing like, wow, there's a lot of information. If you're not careful, you can just overly process and thinking, I just need one more book, one more book, one more book. Fear can manifest itself into being a paralysis of analysis into I'll do it next week or next month or the 15th or the 25th or the January is the right time. And yes, there are by far scenarios in life that timing matters, but I'm referring to moving the timeline and convincing ourselves that it's not the right time because we're in this perpetual state of being over-analyzing everything and we just can't get to a point to make a decision. Or you could even call it endless tweaking, and where ultimately what we're doing is we're taking no action at all, which that is what fear, that's actually the end result of fear, is no action. Lost opportunities in the over complication of analyzing everything. I'll never forget many years ago when I owned my second business in the mid to late 90s. That will date you. If you know that decade, you probably do. Where I had an opportunity where someone presented a very lucrative opportunity, but in my dismissal and my analyzation of it, and I look back on that and I know that it was actually just, I was thinking through a lens of fear because I couldn't really conceptualize, and I didn't really do any actual true investigative work or research or whatever. And again, this is pre the internet as we know it today, so it was a lot harder back then, as you probably remember, on really understanding things. And I lost a significant business opportunity that could have, at least during that time period, really changed the trajectory of the outcomes of the next decade of my life. But that, I did it to myself, and more importantly, I allowed fear to kind of get in there. And then you have the psychological toll. It's just, you probably have been there where, day after day after day, it just, you have this mental weight, and you can almost feel its physical presence on your shoulders, pushing down, or you may get headaches, or you get stress aches, or, it's just, you're not settled, you're not at peace. You go to bed at night, you put your head on the table, or the head on the table. I don't think it's probably great rest if you're putting your head on the table. But you put your head on the pillow would be more preferable, at least for me. But you can't go to sleep because you are just in this constant state of angst. Fear is part of that. The last thing is you've got the cost of actually giving into the fear. And it's everything from cost of financial, like in my case, where I allowed fear to completely upend and I'm talking about, I lost out on 6-figure opportunity. Fear, that was the cost of that from a financial perspective that could have really helped our family at the time, or my wife and I at the time. We didn't have kids then. Your time. Think about how much time you can potentially waste by just over-processing, over-analyzing, over-questioning, thinking. Because here's what happens. If you're continuing to think and process and move on and on and on and on, the time that you're giving up, not just in lost opportunity of just that word potential opportunity, but also just your time. Think about how much time you may be overthinking something and what you could be proactively doing with your time. And then there's the emotional well-being. God doesn't want you to live in a state of a perpetual fear, perpetual overthinking, perpetual overanalyzation. As I have learned for my own self, and I'll just talk to BJ for a moment, that when I have caught myself into over-processing, over-analyzing, over-stressing, I'm likely not giving it to the Lord and taking it to Him and asking Him to take that burden off of me. Maybe you needed to hear that today. I know that I have had to remind myself often, when I get into that state, I'm not giving this to the Lord to help Him through me. The scripture, when I'm in these trainings, I always forget the actual the scripture where they're at. But it's God's with us to the valley of the shadow of death, though you are with me. And Christianity and our faith isn't just about solving our problems. It's about God being there through them. Maybe you're there today and you're just trying to figure out my next thing and how do I move forward and all that kind of good stuff. And I want to coach, I want to consult, I want to make an impact, I want to increase my income, I want to take control of my life. But you've been thinking about it too long, or for a long time, and you haven't really got anywhere. Maybe that's you today. 3 action items to help move forward. Very simple, by the way. And I've learned this the hard way. I used to do this in a complex way, and I discovered there's a much, much, much easier way to do this. Number 1, this is hard to do, I believe, for a lot of people, especially men, is you want to list down all of your fears. List down, meaning write them down, whether you want to do it on. I'm a big believer in there is value at times of just taking that pen or pencil and just writing. I just think that there's a connection to the brain that helps. You can certainly type it out, voice to text it if you want. I think that you can get really to the depths of what you're going through and how you're feeling when you're writing it down. At least that's just my own observations, opinions based upon experience. But you want to write them down, and you want to write them down on exactly how you're feeling. And I want to encourage you, at least for me, it's been hard to do that at times because when you write that down, how you feel, and you're looking at it and you're reading it, it's painful. It can be painful. It can be hard to recognize, especially if it's something that I've been dealing with for a long time. It's like, golly, I'm allowing myself to just be here for a long time. But you want to list them all out, get them all down, write them all down, get them out there. The more you get them out, the more you write them down, the more you're going to be able to do something with it. The next thing you want to do is develop a fear-busting strategic plan. It's very simple to do. You need to make a decision for yourself. In your plan, who can I enlist to confide in? This could be everything from the professional counselor to a friend, a very close friend, to a colleague, past colleague, someone that you can sit down and truly, it could be your pastor, it could be someone in your men's group, but it's someone who you can really sit down with and just say, I'm dealing with this. This is what I'm going through. Perhaps you need to look at a course or listen to some in deeply enriching podcast or a book. Now, you may say, well, wait a minute, you sat there and said not to go through the overanalyzation of information. That's correct. I'm talking about not going through the overanalyzation of information where you just, I'll move forward when I know more. I'm referring to building a solid plan because you're going to move forward. This is a part of your moving forward plan. And just accountability is the point. Talking to someone, listening to some things, and then also doing your own reading in the Word. I'm a big believer in praying Scripture. The Bible talks about, God talks about, Jesus talks about meditating on His Word day and night. Are you doing that about fear? I believe that when you begin to do that, when you begin to know what the Word says, and you begin to pray Scriptures out loud, you're going to begin to get clarity on how to move forward in your own life. And then the third is take immediate action. This is as simple as I know how to, at least it has been for my own life, and what I encourage others, especially those men of believers who are believers. The journey of 1,000 miles, it starts with one step. And oftentimes it's like, I want to build a business coaching practice. And we're so focused on the end goal of making impact, of income and all that, but we don't recognize that, just taking one small action towards it is a plus. And so, beginning to determine, here's my plan. If you're looking at expanding into, using systems and tools, you got to take an action step to learn about them and make a decision which one is for you and what's necessary, what's needed. But taking action every single day, even when they're small, simple action steps, moves you closer to your goal. Now, at some point, you're going to have to speed those action steps up and have multiple action steps every single day. But if you haven't been taking any action at all, doing something, moving towards your goals and your dreams is going to be critical. Period. I wrote something down. I'm trying to find it. It's something that I found that I just can't put my finger on it, but it's good. Hold on. I'm going to find it. It has to do with 6 months from now, you'll either have 6 months of excuses or 6 months of progress. You choose. Isn't that powerful? Think about it. 6 months from now, you could be, or you could even look back 6 months behind you. If you're in the exact spot that you've been in 6 months ago, I'm telling you right now that you're due a good old-fashioned self-to-self assessment to determine how you're not going to be where you are 6 months from now. Because 6 months from now, you'll have either 6 months of excuses or 6 months of progress, regardless of what happens in your life. I hope this meant something to you. I hope you got some value out of this. That is my heart. That is my goal. This is what we do in our coaching community. And I pray that wherever you are in your journey about moving forward, that you'll take some action steps, do the self-assessment exercise, develop your fear-busting plan, take action today. I hope that helps. Take care.